Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Spring 2021 West Virginia Cybersecurity Expo. I am Patrick Smith, and Rob Jenkins is going to talk to us about mobile app development, what it is, where we buy it, how we start it. All those wonderful questions will be answered. Will they, Rob?
I hope so. Certainly hope so. Okay. So as Pat said, I'm Rob Jenkins, and this is What is Mobile App Dev, short for development, and where do I start? First of all, a little bit about me. My formal education is in physics and applied mathematics. I have over 25 years of experience in the IT industry, and that covers not just development, but also networking, building PCs, just about every aspect of the IT industry you can think of, applications, web, everything. I'm a self-taught programmer. I started teaching myself how to program at a pretty young age, and I have experience in C, C++, Python, PHP, JavaScript, but also Ruby on Rails, some other frameworks, Cold Fusion, things like that. I've worked with a lot of different things over those years. The big thing is, though, that none of this happened in that order. The formal education in physics and applied mathematics didn't happen until I was very much an adult. My formal education started, I went, high school and then into college the first time, and started a biology program. Dropped out of that, and because I already had a good job going in the IT industry, which was based on being a self-taught programmer, which started when I was very young, when I was 7. I started teaching myself BASIC on some of the very first home computers. But you don't necessarily have to have I say this just because you don't necessarily have to have a traditional straight path through through traditional education and into the job market and into an industry. There's many different paths to being a developer or being anything else, really, as there are people. So it's important to keep in mind that where you are in life doesn't necessarily define you. Where you want to go should be the major thing. So enough philosophy. Let's talk about mobile app development and what it is. Obviously, mobile phones, smartphones, we all carry them around in our pockets, and those phones have apps. They're not just phones, they run little programs on them. Mobile app development is like application development for any platform, really. Let's say if you were going to write a program for a desktop environment, you would choose your target. You would pick either a Mac or a PC, or maybe if you had lots of experience or a development team with resources on both sides of the fence, you could do a cross-platform thing. You write source code, you design the user interface, and you build the app and you deploy it. For a desktop application, you could do that. There are a lot of different avenues to develop the application, what user environment you want, what APIs you decide to use, things like that. And there are a lot of different ways of deploying the application. Everything from getting it in a shrink wrap box that's going to show up in the in Best Buy or your local big box office store, down to I'm putting it on my website. You can download it, or you could give it to your friends and colleagues on a zip drive or a little thumb drive. These things are all avenues that you can pursue for deploying your app after you've gotten it built. So in a lot of ways, mobile app development is similar. You have a couple of different major platforms. You have Android and iOS. You have different operating systems that you're targeting there. You're targeting, so you're going to have to use different software development kits, different APIs, things like that. But your paths to deploying your app are a little bit different in this respect. That's a little restricted just based on the platforms. We'll get to that in a second. But mobile application development is definitely a growing field. We're using mobile devices more and more. They're becoming increasingly dominant over desktop, and even companies that have traditional desktop applications and have a presence in the desktop world, they're increasingly have a mobile component as well. So there you have, it's definitely a growing space. So passing the number of desktops available. And so when you're looking at a target market, if you're interested in developing applications, there are many, many more mobile devices in the world than there are desktop machines. And everybody walks around with them pretty much continuously. So I did mention that distribution sets mobile application apart a little bit. You are kind of constrained in how you get your app out there. You've gone through all this time and effort to build an application. Well, your distribution channel is generally through either the App Store or the Google Play Store. So that adds an extra hurdle, a little bit more complexity towards application development for mobile platforms, but it also helps get your application in front of the maximum number of people. If you were going to traditionally build an app that's going to wind up shrink wrapped in a box and put on shelves, you've got a publisher that's going to have to work with certain distribution challenges, getting your app in stores and things like that. But with the mobile app stores, your app is available to anyone that searches for it or searches for the category and keywords that your app is deployed under. And in the end, you wind up with your application running on one of the millions upon millions of smartphones floating around the world today. And your app could be one of these cute little boxes we all see on our little icons we see on our phones, and it could be out there running on potentially millions of devices. So why would you want to do this? Why would you want to get into application development and mobile application development in particular? What motivates people to do this? Well, first of all, it's money. Money influences people to do a lot of things. And if you're looking for a career, you could do a lot worse than a mobile application developer. There are lucrative jobs, many jobs available to do this. And even if you want to do this as an independent person and run your own thing out there, you can make a good bit of money doing something independent, even on your spare time. This is a couple of screenshots from a mobile game called Flappy Birds, which was a horrible little application that completely ripped off Super Mario Brothers. Had advertisements on it. It was ad-supported application, and an independent developer pumped this out in 2014 and made a little bit of money off doing this. For the month or so that it was popular, the developer claimed that it was bringing in about $50,000 per day in ad revenue. But aside from money and finding a stable and in-demand career, it's kind of gratifying to be able to develop an application on your machine at home, your desktop machine, build software that winds up running on millions and millions of devices, and something that people find useful and adds value to their lives. So a lot of people find some fulfillment in that, and I certainly think it's a fulfilling thing to pursue. So in general, why would we do this? You can make it a good paying career. It is an in-demand skill. Companies around the world are looking, like I said, to establish a mobile presence through an application, and they will either hire out a company to build that, where you could work in one of these production houses, or you could work in-house building that kind of thing. But it is an in-demand skill. And like I said, it's gratifying work to be able to build something that can very directly add value to people's lives and maybe provide them with a little bit of fun. And it's something that, that you've produced, and you can know that is floating around on devices, sitting in everybody's pockets and around the world. This kind of career does give you a lot of flexibility. Any kind of development career, any kind of development job, software development, is something that you can do anywhere in the world. I think the last year has shown us that a lot of jobs can be done remotely, but programming most assuredly so. You can work as part of a team or as a solo act from anywhere in the world, upload your code, push it up to the app and Play stores. And a lot of people program and travel. They're digital nomads, and they just work from wherever they happen to be. So anywhere with an internet connection and good cell phone service is your office. So this kind of career gives you a lot of flexibility, and not just with your location, but also not getting locked into a job. Since it is a very in-demand skill set, you can always move around if you have to a different job. But outside of jobs, maybe you've got the next big thing. You've got an idea that you want to work on, and maybe it's contributes a little more to society than Flappy Birds or even Twitter. And learning mobile application development gives you the tools to take your idea and turn it into something in the world. So that begs the question of, how do I get started doing this? How do I approach this? What do I need to know? What kind of hardware? What kind of skill set? What kind of software do I need? Well, today it's much better than it used to be. Originally, when you wanted to start mobile application development, when smartphones first came out, there were very basic integrated development environments, very basic build tools for doing this, and you had to work in either Java originally for Android, or for iOS, I believe you could use Swift or their C++ implementation. I personally didn't go down the iOS development path at that point, because the places that I was working, they had specific needs. They would use Android devices and things like that. So insofar that I worked towards mobile app development in the early stages of this, was more geared towards Android. And you very definitely had to pick one side or the other, especially if you were an independent, or invest a ton of time and effort learning one platform, and then turn around and invest a lot of time and effort learning the other platform. There were no cross-platform tools available. You did native development on one side or native development on the other side. So this was a big barrier to entry for application development, and everybody knew it. The first foray into a cross-platform development environment came from the fact that both of these platforms had a concept of a web view. You could pull up a web page inside of your application. So the initial push towards cross-platform development was layered on top of that. You would build some sort of web application, and that application would get bundled and stored and run inside of a web view on each one of these. PhoneGap is an example of a platform that tried to provide a cross-platform experience for the developer, and did. I don't want to slight that in any way. It was a cross-platform development, and still may be. I think recently it's been kind of pushed towards end of life. But the problem with this was an interpreted thing. The only native code for those kinds of apps was the shell that was running it. That was running the web view and then pulling up the app. So it was really a web app running inside of a shell that was actual native code. But fortunately, we've regressed, and we have tools that kept this paradigm of using web-like technologies for designing the UI, and then brought in other languages like JavaScript and Dart and things like that to let us handle the program logic. So in the modern day, we can there are cross-platform tools available that let us develop on both sides of the fence using those technologies. So today, before we web app, before we app dev, we web dev. So if I were going to answer the question, how do I get started? What kind of skills you would need? I would say know how to be a good web developer. Learn how to use HTML and cascading style sheets for styling. I would learn JavaScript, modern JavaScript, and then you can approach one of these frameworks like React, which React Native is built on. You can move into React Native. HTML gives you the skills that you'll need for laying out your user interface. There are really two parts to modern applications in general, just very broadly. There's the user interface, and then there's the code logic for how your interface, the user interacts with your interface, provides data or receives data, and how that data is processed. HTML and CSS provide the visual layers, the presentation layers for the web, and JavaScript provides the functional layers for web apps. And then you can that same type of paradigm applies in mobile app development. And I mentioned React and React Native here. React Native is a framework. It's an open source framework for building mobile application user interfaces. It's cross-platform, it's open source, it's developed by Facebook, and they used it to, they built it in response to, they're a large company with a large installed user base, and they tackled the mobile problem. And they ran into the same problem that any of us would have in developing that cross-platform experience. They had separate code bases and things like that. And React Native was their response to that. And when we build in React Native, we get to use all of those HTML and CSS paradigms before that we used before in the web world. A div becomes a view, just a general box that defines a region on the screen. Maybe a span becomes a text element. IMG becomes an image. And we use Flexbox just like you would in the web development world for laying out the spacing of the components in your user interface. So in the end, you get to build things with code that looks like this, that produces a user interface that looks like that. It makes doing HTML solved a long time ago how to lay out graphical interfaces and graphical elements on a display surface. So why reinvent the wheel? Why not be able to use those kinds of elements, these kinds of tags like the container tag, header tag, content card, these things, and then use Flexbox for positioning stuff and to build your layout. So the good thing, the big change between what we were doing with PhoneGap and other solutions like that in the past is that instead of this being an interpreted thing, React Native actually builds out native code for each platform so that you can take advantage of improved performance and get a more native-like experience. So, but even then, inside of React Native, there are still challenges. And the two biggest challenges are getting things to look right across the two major different platforms. If I use a button, let's say, for an Android, style it to look like an Android button using the material UI components, material design components. It's going to look fine for users of Android devices, but it's going to look really weird for people that are used to the Cupertino interfaces on a iOS device. So, and vice versa, if you design. So what designers in React Native wound up doing is complex logic, saying if we're on this platform, then use this styling. If we're on this platform, use other styling. Native base helps you with that. You use the native base elements, and behind the scenes, it automatically detects which platform you're on and provides a user interface that looks native for users on either platform. And the second major problem is the hardware is obviously very different between an Android SDK and an iOS SDK. You're not going to address the camera in the same way. You're not going to read from the gyroscopes and things like that in the same way. This other framework here, Expo, solves that problem for you, and much in the same way that native base abstracts away the differences in UI. Expo abstracts away the differences in hardware. So you can open up a camera tag and interface with the camera and have a camera preview in your app with one bit of code that works across both platforms. Same with location-based things with orientation. It abstracts away all the hardware differences and helps you with that. In addition, the Expo framework will help automate your code signing and build process for both the Play Store and the App Store. You can design, build, and prototype your application locally on a local machine. There is a web dashboard when you're running Expo that pops up a QR code, and you download the Expo app for your phone. And if your phone is on the same physical network as your development machine, you can point your Expo app at that QR code, and it will pull over the latest JavaScript bundle of your application and run it in your phone, so you can debug it on an app. And then once you're satisfied with that, with the way the app runs and everything, you can push that up to their servers, publish it, and they will compile it into a native package for either the App Store or the Play Store on their servers, and you can download them back. They'll handle code signing and stuff for you too. So it's really a nice framework to work within. And all of this logic and stuff for handling the functionality of your program, your app, is done in JavaScript. So between the two, between having a really good foundation in JavaScript and having a good foundation in HTML, those kinds of things will translate and serve you well in getting into using React Native for mobile application development. That's how I would get started. And this is just my personal experience and my preference, but I found it to be a really good framework to work with, a good platform to use. And I'm a little biased. That's how I teach the mobile application development program at Mount West. So like I said, a little bit biased there, but I do think it's a good stack, a good technology stack to use for mobile application development.